Hello and welcome to The Storied Human. Today we're going to have a chat with Renzo del Castillo. He's from originally from Peru. He's been here a while with his family. He has a tumultuous story about how he came here. He's a poet and he's a world traveler, and he has a lot of things to say about culture and how we gain empathy from traveling. So I'd love to hear more about all of it, and I want to say welcome to Renz.
Thank
Welcome
you,
to The
Lynn. It's a
Storied
pleasure to be
Human.
here. Pleasure,
It's a
pleasure to be here.
pleasure to have you. So, where shall we start? I know there's a lot of drama to how you came here, and I think people would be really interested in that.
Sure, we can start at the beginning if you'd
Okay.
like. How did I come to the States? Well, my father was a major in the Peruvian army, and my mom was the secretary to the Minister of Health. One day, before my sister was born, there was a union negotiation happening, and some members of the union were members of a terrorist organization known as Shining Path, and they came armed to the negotiation. And my mom, who was there, said, "Hey, does anybody want any coffee or something to that effect?" And I guess because there was a bit of misogynism there and they didn't think much of it, and she was a woman, they're like, "Yeah, go get us coffee." And she came back with the police.
Oh, good for her.
And yeah, and she came back with the police, and they marked her for death. So
Oh my
one of our
God.
nannies they discovered she was a terrorist, and they stopped her before she did anything. One of the nurses, when my mom gave birth to my sister, was also found to be a terrorist, and they stopped
Oh
that.
my
And there was
God.
a third instance. So after that, my mom talked to my dad, and my godfather lived here. He was a U.S. citizen. He sponsored my student visa, and we came here with my mom, my dad, my little sister, and myself around when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, if you had stayed, something terrible would have happened.
I'm assuming so. I mean, when my father passed away a couple of years ago, I cleaned out his study, and I found the papers from the deposition, like the transcripts from court, and I guess I always thought about it, and I'm like, oh, maybe it was exaggerated in order to. No, it's like
No,
I asked
it
my
was
mom
probably
about it, and
worse,
she
right?
said, yeah, yeah. I asked my
Oh
mom
my
about
God.
it, and she said, no, this is all true. So
I can't even imagine, with little kids, I can't even imagine how that felt for your parents. I'm so glad that you were able to get out.
thank you.
So, where did you guys settle when you first came here?
Miami. I still live in Miami. I spent my entire life trying to leave it, and now I love it here.
I love Miami.
I
It's
love
special.
Miami.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
special.
there's something to it, right? So just not to deviate, but I was recently in Dublin, and Dublin has a history, a literary history. You know,
Yeah.
you have Oscar Wilde, James Joyce, Samuel Beckett. It's very respected, and people tend to think of Miami as a bit of a party town, bit of a young, maybe superficial place, but all of the big ticket political issues that are going on in the world, whether it be Medicare fraud or immigration, they're all happening here. And there is a culture of people that write about it, want to talk about it, have certain viewpoints about it. So there's a lot of depth to Miami if you look, you know.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. And I love the mix. It's just exciting to be there. There's such a mix of people, of, you know, ages of buildings. I just remember visiting there and loving it because it was exciting.
It's an Art Deco paradise for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I love how they didn't let them go to ruin. They renovated them. It's just there's a real respect for history.
Yeah. So
So,
just to finish up on that, we came
yes,
here. How was it being in Miami, to answer your question? Sorry about the detour there.
that's okay.
Um, it was difficult at first, right? Because when we were in Peru, I came when I was about 5, so I was old enough to understand certain things, but not old enough to understand the rest of the context. So we came here, we were like upper middle class or lower upper class in Peru, and when we came to the States, we started from the bottom. There were nights where my parents would tell me and my sister, "Go ahead, we already ate dinner," but they didn't, right?
Oh my
And I knew they were
gosh.
lying, right? Because it wasn't enough. So that marks you. I always like to say I'm kind of like Scarlett O'Hara, right? Like when I was a kid, I decided, "As God is my witness, I will never let my family go hungry again, right?
Oh,
So I became very driven. When you asked little Renzo, like, what do you want to be? I said, I want to have money because money equals safety. Money means you can eat. Money means they don't turn off the light. Money means you can pay your mortgage, pay your rent. So it was something that was incredibly defining for me, but we made it okay. And because of that, I wasn't really able to travel much until I achieved a level of financial security. But what my parents gave me was a thirst for knowledge, a lot of literature, introduced me to poetry, my grandparents as well. So we were rich in other ways, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
That's a great way to raise a child. Yeah,
Mm.
to plant those seeds. So, what did you major in college?
So originally I went to UF, University of Florida. Go Gators. I went to
What?
UF for the aerospace engineering program.
Wow.
And about 6 credits short of graduating, I decided that I was always fascinated by how things work, like taking it apart and seeing how things work. But around that time, I really got into Neruda and Bukowski and Wisława Szymborska, and I started just appreciating that things worked at all. So I was always the kid that did the right thing, got the good grades, never gave any grief, and I decided that I wanted to switch my major to poetry, English lit. You can imagine what that Thanksgiving/Christmas season was like with my immigrant parents, right?
They
Like,
weren't real
how are you?
thrilled. Yeah.
No, no. It was not good, but it came from a place of fear, but it came from a place of love, right? Like, how are you going to eat? How are you going to make money? How are you going to do all
Yeah.
these things that I already mentioned I was concerned about? So I ended up studying poetry with some great American poets and critics. One of my teachers was a man by the name of William Logan. If you look him up, he is a very intelligent, very capable critic and poet. And that's where I learned a lot about poetry, just like, the form, the meter, guzzles, villanelles, pantoums, like all these different things. And I got into a program in Cambridge for grad school, but because we didn't have our citizenship yet. It took us over a decade to get our residency
Oh my
because of the way
God.
the immigration system is. I almost didn't get my scholarships for university because we got political asylum right before I graduated. If I didn't have political asylum, all those scholarships wouldn't have gone to me, right?
Oh my gosh.
So I was able to do that, but it was after September 11th. I'm 40 years old now, so when I was graduating, it was 2002. September 11th happened 2001. I'm sorry, when I was graduating was 2006. I graduated high school 2002, but it was after September 11th. And for those of you who were around back then, you know that the situation in the country was heightened, and it was up to the discretion of the immigration official at the border at the time whether they let you in or not. And I knew two people who were deported. They weren't terrorists. They went to study abroad and they were deported.
Oh my
So
God.
my parents told me, "Hey, how about you finish here?" And I didn't fight them. I got it, right? I
Yeah.
completely understood. It was logical, but I was heartbroken.
Of
I was
course you
heartbroken
were.
about it.
Cambridge is a big deal, right?
I wanted to be a long-haired hippie in Cambridge, like
Oh,
writing poems and living life and looking at a rose and feeling it was beautiful because it was finite, very Blakean, right? Um, but that wasn't the case. So I went full corporate in that sense. I ended up doing my grad school. I did international intercultural communications. I ended up coming back to Miami and just to help out, to help my mom is here. And I ended up getting a job at a call center for healthcare company because I figured what are the industries where you can make money? And in my opinion, I think law and healthcare benefit from inefficiency. When something doesn't work, they just toss more money at it. I figured some would land in my pocket, right? Based on everything I described in terms of why I was concerned with money equals safety. And then that eventually led to within a week I was running projects. Within 3 years, I became a consultant, project manager, then did some engagements and became an executive in healthcare. And that's what I do now for my day job. I'm a VP for a
wow.
healthcare company.
That's amazing. What a left turn, huh? But you
Yeah.
know, when you have basic good skills and you're smart, you can excel in a lot of places.
No, thank you. Thank you for
You
that.
know,
It's I
honestly,
had
no,
a
that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
well, I had a good friend. I achieved, as I mentioned, a level of financial success, but I was not happy.
Ah,
And I have a really good friend. His name is Curtis Franklin. He's one of my closest friends from college. He's in his 60s. He's a bit older than us, but one of us for sure. There was never that difference. And I told him I'm just not happy. I remember that conversation very vividly.
yeah.
And he said, and he talks exactly this way. So he's like, "What are you passionate about?" And I couldn't answer him
Oh,
because everything I thought of was in relation to someone else, right? Like I had
oh,
just focused so hard on, I guess, people pleasing for a bunch of different reasons and how I grew up that I couldn't say it. And he said, "Well, follow your passions because they'll lead you to your purpose. And a life full of purpose is a life of joy." That's Kurt. I eventually realized that I'm very passionate about problem solving. I love puzzles. I love looking at complex things. I told you I love breaking things down, seeing how they work, putting them back together, solving those things. I also, whether it be narcissistic or not, I would hope that you and I, like you leave this conversation better off than when you came here. I hope I have a positive impact in your life.
I think that's
So,
lovely. Yeah.
yeah, I think you should leave the world better off than when you found it, right? So, when it comes to work, healthcare, I was very frustrated because I considered it a failed system. And, but I get to solve complex issues there every day. And I also get to help the people that report to me discover their potential, achieve different things. I am much more fulfilled by the achievement of my people than I am of mine. And that switch was crazy because I was a consultant. I was very
Yeah.
much focused on what I can achieve. I was a gunslinger. I came into town,
Yeah.
grabbed my money and left. Now I'm a sheriff. I stay. I make sure the town is livable. I, there's a different skill set from doing to enabling others to do.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of empathy, right? Which is
Yeah.
why art is so important to me. I think art helps you develop an analytical relationship between yourself and the object of where the art comes from, which in turn helps develop empathy. You're seeing it from another perspective. You're
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
it from somebody else's viewpoint. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to that
I
point.
like
And
that. It's also, I hear, a dropping of ego, because you can't empower people that way, and you can't enjoy it unless you've grown a little bit and you've dropped that ego a little bit.
1,000%. Look, when I was a consultant, you have to have ego. My dad was a fighter pilot in the army. He was a helicopter fighter pilot. He had to have ego. To be a good consultant and a good project manager, you never call a consultant if things are fine. You
Yeah,
call
that's
them
true.
because things are breaking down.
Fix
So
this, please. Yeah.
you have to have a
Yeah.
healthy ego to come in and take reign of a situation and move forward. But for me to tell the resources that work for me, the project managers, just in case, like I was a project manager, right? Before I became an executive, to tell a project manager that does this every day that I know more than them is hubris. It's
Yeah.
false and it's not
Yes.
true. They are the subject matter experts. They are the ones on the front lines. What I have is a different perspective, and I
Yeah.
see it from a higher level and my job becomes removing obstacles from their path. But
Yeah.
I don't know more than them. And to
Oh,
come
that's
at it
so
from that
good.
perspective,
Yeah.
it's just, it's detrimental to the relationship you want to build. There's
Yeah.
trust there.
There's a real art to being a great leader. Some people just never put it together, I think. Yeah, I've had good and
Mm.
bad. I work in IT as a technical writer during the day. Yeah.
Okay.
And lately I've been at a healthcare company, and I've spent the last year of my life um, doing major overhauls of documents about prior authorization software. So I've been knee deep in this. I've been knee deep in it. But I'm so
Yes.
tickled that you said you hope you leave things better than you found them, because one of my interviews, because I'm usually a contractor, I'm like a consultant, I hop around like a gun for hire,
Yeah.
definitely. But the funny thing is, as I got older, I get attached to people. So it's harder and harder to leave. But somebody said, what do you like about tech writing? And what I like is that I leave something better than I found it. I leave it more understandable. If one person picks it up and is helped by it, my day is good.
You know,
So there
it's
is
funny
that
you mentioned
sense.
that. It's funny you mentioned that because one of our I had a resource that was a tech writer, and he didn't want to be anything other than a tech writer. And I think that's fine if that's what you want. Some people want to grow in different areas, or he wanted to be in what he did. But what I challenged him with is, so how can you become a better tech writer? What certifications can you take? What do you want to learn? Let's talk
Mm,
about it, right? You don't have to grow somewhere else. And he eventually developed into a damn good Scrum Master alongside being a tech writer.
makes sense.
He no longer reports to me, right? But recently, when we transitioned over, we were just acquired by a bigger health company, and we're in a different area. And he had to go a different way because of just the way the levels were in his position. But we couldn't reach our templates, and he contacted me and his manager who works for me out of the blue just to catch up. And he had told us like he just obtained his agile certification from PMI, from the Project Management Institute, right?
Fantastic.
Um, which which is just lovely to hear that he's continuing to grow and develop
Yeah.
this. And then he said, "Hey, do you need those templates?" And he sent them over. And it was just such a gesture, such a kind gesture that he didn't need to do,
Yeah.
right? Like he had all the templates from before, and it's we stay in touch, of course. Like if you one of the things we say, as long as you leave through the front door once in the family, you're always in the family. So I
Yeah.
continue to coach resources that no longer report to me in different companies and different things, and we
That's
maintain a friendship.
excellent. Yeah.
But it was just so nice to see him just genuinely, out of the goodness of his heart, provide information from the place where he thought he didn't want to leave,
Yeah.
which is now just, it's not his skill set, it's a basis for his overall skill set, which is just, it just,
That's
that
so
brings me joy.
cool. That's
That
so
type
cool.
of stuff makes me happy, you know?
It's funny, tech writing, it's very few people stay strict tech writers. Usually, I think in the last 10 years, I've seen it's usually tech writer slash something else because especially in IT, it's so easy to use us in all kinds of, project coordinator, business analyst. I've been a process analyst. I was a systems engineer at Lucent. We're just sort of chameleons because our skill set, especially in information technology, lends itself to so many things. And not everybody sees that sometimes. They think of you as like a wart on the side of the system, but you're an integral part of this.
But
It's,
think about what you do, Lynn. It's about what you do is you take the abstract and make it tangible so we can communicate, right? I don't want to like just for your audience, I don't mean to get too techy, but basically a technical writer creates documentation, creates templates, creates a variety of different things, but you take all these abstract concepts of engineering and you allow the business to be able to read it to communicate to the client. So that's art. I mean, that's what we're talking about poetry. You're taking these abstract concepts and you're making them tangible for the audience to be able to intake. And that is foundational for any skill set anywhere you want.
yeah, to
Proper
do it well.
documentation, proper
Yeah.
communication, 1,000%. I
Yeah.
think that's why
And
you're so marketable in different areas.
the only way to do it well, and I have to, educate everyone everywhere I ever go, is to get in is to let me in different pieces of the system. I'm a senior tech writer, so I do UI design. I've done wireframes. I do user acceptance testing. I design
Of
those
course.
tests because once you learn all those things, you have input. You have because you represent the user. You're always representing the user, and that's such a cool thing. Talk about empathy.
A
You
thousand
can't do
percent.
any of these jobs well, UI design or development or a business analyst, especially the way I was, where you sit in between the business and the developers. You can't do that translation unless you have empathy for the user. You have to assess the user. And so I just think that that's so cool that you that you see all that.
Well, it's funny to me when people say, "But you're an executive, why do you do poetry?" Or "You're a poet, how do you, do the business world?" I'm like, there's no separation for me.
Yeah,
Like it really is just communication and
yeah.
being able to work together to solve complex issues, whether it's breaking down like the essence of what love means to that person at that particular moment versus getting a user to be able to accept the software that just came out without bugs. It's still like communication. You're still flowing between
But
each other and getting that connection so that you can put out something greater than yourself, you know?
I think when you're creative, it's just you're always going to use it wherever you are. You're a problem solver, creative. I always feel like when I'm in a room with people that aren't especially creative, I'm annoying because I'm always saying, well, we could do this and we could do this. And I'm always thinking of these like a million things, that we could do, which not everybody appreciates, but it is a useful thing to let your creativity flow because out of that, maybe 100 ideas, five are good, It's like,
How many engineers do you know that are musicians, right? How many
yes,
engineers that you know that do
exactly.
different things? And it's
Exactly.
because people say like I'm right-brained, I'm left-brained. There is no evidence, right? That one area of your brain, if you look at the literature, if you go out and look at it, I
Yes.
encourage people to do, that it's fully on the right brain, fully on the left brain because it's complex. Multiple areas of our brains light up. So to say like, oh, I'm technically focused, that doesn't mean I'm not creative. No, like I've
Yeah.
done abstract mathematics. To me, there's nothing more creative than abstract mathematics, right? But then you go into people who code and then you go in people who write music and that
Right.
like being able to read
Yes.
music, that's something that's applies to the logic part of my brain, but it doesn't mean you can't be creative. You need that. For me, I
Yeah.
find that I do better when I have that discipline as a foundation, and then it just allows me to be as creative as possible. If
Yeah.
you go to
They're
poetry,
not,
it's the meter, right? There's the
yeah,
math.
they're not right.
Boom.
There's a rhythm. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's so true. That's so cool. And I see that all the time in developers, how creative they are and how they are musically oriented. And people are often surprised that I'm a creative writer also. Like it's
Here we
like you're
go.
supposed to be one or the other. And I'm like, no. But it is unusual. I don't know why. Yeah, I think a lot of us just are sort of trained to be either or, So tell
I
me
think
about the
it's
poetry. Tell us about what you're drawn to, what you write about.
so this book, the reason I wrote this book was there was a 7 year period. It's going to be 7 years now. It recently kind of paused where I started thinking, and this is not logical at all, right? This is a very emotional thing I'm about to say, but I thought life had stopped giving me things and it started taking them away. And that's not
Ooh,
true. What if you and I hit it off today? We become great friends. Life had just gifted us this friendship today, right? As long as you
yeah.
breathe, you have the ability to get something new.
You have a chance.
But
Yeah.
you have a chance. But in the last 7 years, I lost my father to pancreatic cancer. I lost my grandmother, his
Oh,
mom. I lost my cousin, who was my age, a week apart. My little cousin, who was 10 years younger. I lost my best friend's mom. I lost a number of family members, a number of friends. I lost my dog. The relationship I thought was going to be marriage ended around that time. So I was just
that's
moving
too
too
many
fast.
losses. Yeah. You're pummeled. It's
Yeah,
too
and I was
many.
moving too fast to grieve. I have this thing that my mind is always on the future, not anymore, right? I do a lot of yoga to help me be centered in the present moment and uncomfortable in the present moment and things like that, different philosophies of that sort. But I wasn't allowing myself to acknowledge all of these things. And, that comes out either as your skin breaks out or your back hurts or you become anxious, you have trouble breathing. It comes out,
It
right?
does.
Until I realized that, all right, the first time you ate sushi, right? Did you do that because you thought, hey, this looks cool? Or did somebody you love or admire or hung out with or a friend said, hey, try this. This is cool. Your favorite
Yeah.
movie. Why is it your favorite movie?
Yeah. I would have
Your
never
favorite,
eaten sushi without somebody telling me it was good.
right.
Right.
Your favorite book. Did your parents read it to you? Right. Like, and then that's when I realized that we are made up of all the little pieces of everybody who's ever loved us. And in that sense, if that is true, if I am here, then they're still here.
Yeah.
And that is why. the book is called Still. The other reason it's called Still is that I needed to be still and just allow myself a moment to acknowledge this loss,
Yeah.
feel this loss, and put it down on paper. Um, I needed to be still in the moment. It's like looking at a pond, right? You have to look at that still water to truly see yourself. So that's the other reason the book is called Still. And
That's
it really chronicles my family's journey, what it means to be an immigrant in a center for Latin American Caribbean migrations, which is Miami, what it's like to grow up from that perspective. But it's not solely that. It's just it's snapshots of my life so that if you read the book, you'll get to know some of these people that I love, and maybe you'll love them a little bit too.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So how can we get the book? Is it
Sure.
available on
Yeah,
Amazon or
it's available on Amazon. I'm sure I'll send you the links. You can have it when you
good, the
post
show
this
notes?
episode. But we a couple of weeks ago we became an Amazon bestseller in multiple categories, so we're doing pretty well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I just love the idea of people having like a hardcover book and
Oh
opening
yeah.
it up, right? The US,
Oh
we
yeah.
don't do that as much as like Europe does or South America does,
Yeah.
right? But just the fact that in the US we've become an Amazon bestseller is encouraging to me because that's something that I didn't even think about. I originally just published the book because I wanted to do it for myself and then kind of use it as a tax break. All the until I realized that it could be much more. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Barnes and Noble. If you're in the Miami area, you can find it at Books and Books, at Dalazine, other local bookstores around here.
It's
Yeah.
lovely. You know, the thing I love so much about poetry, and I didn't write it for a little while. I won an award in college. I actually did win an award for my poem, which I should have taken more seriously. I know but I had to make money. So, it sounds familiar, right? So I
Uh-huh.
went into tech writing. My friend said, "Oh, she was a year ahead of me." And she goes, "Oh, there's this new thing called tech writing, and I think you could do it. And AT&T is hiring and you should try it." So, but I never stopped writing poetry. Um, but I took a long break actually. And recently I went to an open mic and read my poems. And I knew my friends, I always share with certain friends, but
Fantastic.
it was amazing because they were super well received, which of course you love. But the real beauty of that night was that there were 8 poets there and we had very similar imagery in our poems. And
Mhm.
even the poet who sponsored it, the professional poet, said your poems are speaking to each other. So there was just that wonderful feeling of, I felt like we had met in a dream and we had agreed to show up, because the way I did that night was 2 days before. I hadn't even known they were going to do it at a local art museum. And I just said, "Oh yeah, I should go to that." Like, no fear, no pausing. I just went to it. And then somebody else said, "Oh, you got the memo." It's like so wonderful that we were so connected in that way. But the real point I wanted to make was somebody was talking to me about how they love my poem. And I said, "Well, you've known me since I was young. You know that every single thing in there is real from my family." And they said, "Yeah, it's so specific." And I said, "Yeah,
Mhm.
the more specific you get, the more universal it is. Somehow that's what happens when you
Believe
get down
that.
to that kernel. That's the beauty of it for me, that I read
You
something
you left
and it,
connected that night though, right? Like you went there. You
oh my
went there
God,
with what you brought and you left with all of these. See, I think that if God, the concept of God or the entity of God exists, he, she, it, whatever you believe, the divine is between us right now communicating.
I
And
agree.
then when you go to this to this open mic with people you don't know and find this common thread of human, I mean, that's how you start healing yourself from the trauma of being human. Not to be
That's the
over
whole,
dramatic.
no, but that's the whole
You,
deal. You're absolutely
yeah.
right. It was, and coming out of the pandemic, it was so joyous to
Mhm.
be with, first of all, when was the last time I hung out with poets? I think it's been like a million years, and to have other poets come up to me and say, oh, could you email me that last one? And it was so good. And just this, and I said, I loved yours. What I said, I can't believe how similar our imagery is. Just that love, that connection. Yes, in person, like the pandemic really took that away from us. And I was always like, oh, this is great. I love Zoom. I don't have to drive into work, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. But after a while, you miss being with real human beings. You miss seeing their smiles. You miss feeling that connection. So it was really special. And my husband went and he said, I could hang out with these people. This is great. Like there was something in the air that night. There really
Yeah,
was.
you
There's a
created that environment
there's
by
a
being
magic.
open and vulnerable to
These
share.
people, oh, the stories. It was just the admiration. Everyone admired each other. And I was like, when was I in a room where everybody was like, yay, you, it's been a while. So yeah, it was wonderful. I loved it. And I
Could
loved
you
that you
could you
did
do me a
that with your
favor?
grief, you
Thank
know?
you. Could you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Could you keep going to open mics?
Well, I will because there's another one in the spring and we all said we would return. Yeah. And I love the woman who
Good.
sponsored it. I just felt like she facilitated it so well. She was leading it, but in the background, she was like very much, she got it, you know, making a
Yeah,
platform for us.
that's
Definitely.
beautiful. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Thank you for hearing it. And I can't wait to read your poems. And
Thank you.
I just, keep on keeping on. You just know what you're doing and you're adding something to the world whenever you tell these stories and whenever you're with your people that you're leading.
Thank
It's for
you.
real. And I
So you
really appreciate you sharing with me.
well, would you like to hear one? I have the book
I was
here.
hoping. Yes, I was
Oh,
hoping.
well, if you would you like it? Yeah.
Yes,
So you
please.
I'll sure. I think I have one in mind now that I'm thinking about it because you mentioned you like to travel, right? And that was the
Oh,
other part of this. Like I think art
yes,
breeds
please.
connection, but I also think if we can, if we have the socioeconomic basis to be able to go ahead and travel and see different areas of the world, I recommend it. If you can speak different languages, I recommend it because it allows you to see things from somebody else's perspective. There's poems in this book that are in Spanish, in French, some with Portuguese words. I believe there may be one with Italian words. And the reason that I did that, that I included those are the ones that I wrote in that language. And then I added the English translation after. But the
Wow.
reason I mention that is I at least think differently when I think in Spanish. Like when I think I dream in English. My thoughts mostly happen in English. I grew up here. I grew up here since
Yeah.
I was 5. But if I'm angry, you better believe my inner monologue goes Spanish. I don't know what happens to me. Like if I just become emotionally upset, it just turns into Spanish in my head. And I find that when I think about a problem in Spanish, I tend to go about it in a much more emotional way. And if I think about it in English, I tend to go about it in a much more logical,
Yep.
spread out way. And it's interesting how that happens. So I'm going to read you a poem. Um, I'll give you the choice. Would you like to hear a poem that was written in Bali, Indonesia, or would you like to hear one in Lisbon, Portugal?
Lisbon. I mean, I love Bali, but I would love to hear one written in Lisbon.
I will do that. It's called Lisboa. I'm exploring, led by cobblestone roads asking to be experienced, no longer searching for a missing piece. I am whole, light reflected, God's glitter envelops the horizon while the hard consonant sounds of European Portuguese pull at my shoulder. The tiled walls on every building bemoan their histories of poverty and sacrifice, birds of paradise. This is the foundation of a people. Turning a corner means opening a gateway to another time, hidden in front of me if I would only see, while the city whispers its secret poetry in my ear.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're
Could we hear
welcome.
the one in Bali too?
No, yeah,
I'm
of
a poetry
course.
hog. It's
No
like,
worries. You tell me, I'll read. They were written to be read. Bali. I thought the sea would be different. The sand is volcanic ash blackened by progress. But the sea is the same. It followed me here, of all places. Solitude is a warm hug. To share this with you is to dilute absinthe with vinegar, intruding unapologetically, abruptly, without a second thought to my introspection. I left you in Canggu with a kiss on the cheek, instead of how I wanted to, dripping sweat and smelling of my cologne. I would miss you. I would wonder where you are. I would wonder who you were with. I did not come here for you. I came here to stage a coup on my ego, to escape the shackles of corporate America and to race time, to see if I remembered how to yield.
Fantastic last line.
Thank you.
It's so good. Thank
And
you.
the reason I won't explain them is that I think that once I write them down and you read them, they become yours.
So
Whatever
true, right?
meaning is in there is for
That's
you to
so
take
good.
in. Yeah.
You know, the poem that I wrote in college, I remember it got printed in the newspaper for the college at Rutgers, and I won the award. It was money, and I had to split it with my roommate because she wrote a poem, and for the first time they had a tie, and we're still friends. And it's a big joke. I'm like, you
Awesome.
couldn't let me have the money, like it's like this. She was like a year younger, and I was like, you couldn't let me have my moment as a senior. But I love her poem, and she loves my poem. But I remember somebody saying to me, I was playing tennis with the editor of the newspaper, and she said, "Oh yeah, I love that poem, feminism and the whole imagery." And she was going on and on and on. And I was so amazed. Like I was young, and so I was thinking, that's not what it's about, you know. It's like, but I realized it wasn't mine anymore. That's such a great way to put it. It wasn't mine. It was what it was to her, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
It is. So for example, that Bali poem, I'm not going to tell you why I wrote it, but I'll tell you two different interpretations that somebody gave me, that
I
people
would
gave
love
me
to
at an
hear them.
open mic.
Yes,
One thought it was about self-discovery, like an eat, pray, love type deal, meeting a lover there and all that stuff. And another person thought it was about globalization and the westernization of Indonesia and how it's encroaching uh, in the in the traditions of the native people from Bali there.
that's amazing.
And I think both of those interpretations are great. And only I know why I wrote it, but I think
Yeah.
both are very valid. And I think it
It's all
applies.
in there. It's all
Mhm.
interwoven. Yeah, that's so cool. I remember reading a poem. My brother took a poetry course and he wanted me to come and read my poems. And it just so happened that the professor was somebody that used to teach at my college. So I went there and I read my poem, and it was about Sylvia Plath. And when I was in
Mhm.
college, Sylvia Plath was like practically worshipped. And
Yeah.
and I thought she was wonderful. Honestly, I loved her poems, but I didn't love the worship. And so I wrote this poem really specifically to sort of attack her. Like she was it was a very short poem, but it was like she was perverted Trinity. She was making a perverted Trinity out of her unfortunate end of her life.
Mhm.
And when I read it, and they were much younger, it was at a community college. And when I read it, they thought Trinity, they thought of there's a book called Trinity. And they started riffing on that. And I was like, I'm not going to break that up. You know, it's like it is whatever it is to you, like whatever it's bringing up in you is what you
Mhm.
need to hear. And I was so, again, very amazed. We don't own it. You know, we don't own it.
Then it becomes ekphrastic, right? Ekphrastic poetry is just poetry written about a work of art. And in that sense, anytime somebody hears a poem, reads a book, sees a painting,
Yeah.
their interpretation of it, the way they describe it to someone else,
Yeah.
becomes an ekphrastic poem in
That's
itself,
so cool. That's so
you know?
cool. Yeah. The
And then
connections are amazing.
you
Well,
create and
thank
you get
you.
inspired.
Is there anything else that I didn't cover that you'd like? I always like to give people a chance if there's something you'd like to say, or did we not say something you would like, or something you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I'll two things. The first one is create. I think creation is the antidote or the antithesis to this languishing that I see people experiencing at work, in life, in this generation of just, you're not depressed, you're not super happy, you're just there. Don't be a passive observer of your life. Go out there, meet people, do what you did, go to an open mic, go eat that dinner with somebody, go talk to someone you don't know. There's, I'm not saying it's not warranted, but there's this fear of the other. There's
Yeah.
this fear of, and
Yep.
a rejection of being learned when it used to be something that was aspired to,
Yeah.
right? That I feel. And the more you learn, the more you know, the more you experience, the more your imagination can grow because you don't imagine what you don't have a reference for.
That's
Go
exactly it.
live your life and create.
I love that.
And
And
the
remember that
other,
you're
go
connected to
ahead,
others. Like I always say, remember
1000%.
who you really are. Remember who you really are. We're not separate. And I
Even
think people, for whatever reason, are encouraged to be separate and be afraid. I think, it's not a good place to be in.
Well, there's a glorification of the individual, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure.
it's very Ayn Rand in that sense, but even
Oh,
Ayn
yeah.
Rand turned from that. But think about somebody as talented as Michael Jordan, considered one of the best basketball players of all time, but he had coaches, he had parents, he
Yeah.
had a wife who supported him throughout the time when he was doing that. He had children who looked up to him. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
are not alone.
Nobody's alone. Right. Nobody does it alone.
Exactly.
That's a
That's what I
great thing.
honestly believe.
I love that. Well, thank you. I could talk to you all night.
Well, I'll give you the second thing before we go. The second thing
Oh,
is,
good, good.
Lynn, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your platform with me, sharing your time with me, your afternoon. I know you could be spending this doing something else, so I'm grateful to you. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to chat with you today.
Oh, same here. It's totally selfish on my part. I just love this. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Been an
Good luck to
absolute
you.
delight. Thank you.
Same
You as
here.
well.